Let's get started on installing Docker on our local machine. This lecture applies to you if you're using Linux or you are using Mac and your Mac version is OS X 10.10.3 or newer, or you're using Windows and your Windows version is Windows 10 or newer. Otherwise, you can skip this lecture and follow the instruction of the next lecture to install Docker Toolbox on your local machine. Here we Google Docker install. The first entry is Docker's official installation page. Just click the link to enter the installation page. The steps required to install Docker vary depending on the operating system you use. If you're using Linux, you can just follow the corresponding installation instruction on this page to install Docker on your operating system. Since Docker is a technology built around Linux containers, people developing on non-Linux platforms would need to use some forms of virtualization to run Docker. If you're running Windows, just scroll down and click the Windows installation link. As you see, there are two options for installing Docker on Windows: Docker for Windows and Docker Toolbox. Now, if you have Windows 10 or a newer version installed, you will be able to install Docker for Windows. Docker for Windows runs as a native Windows application, and it has a built-in virtual machine inside the app, which saves you tons of efforts from managing the VM by yourself. Docker for Windows is the desired way to run Docker on Windows machine, as long as you meet minimum requirement. You can just click the Getting Started with Docker for Windows link to start the installation. Since I'm using Mac, I'll be demoing how to install Docker for Mac on my Mac machine. But the steps should be very similar between Windows and Mac. Here, I scroll down and click the Mac installation page. Similar to Windows, you also have two options here. You can either install Docker for Mac or Docker Toolbox. If your Mac is 2010 or a newer model, and the Mac version is OS X 10.10.3 Yosemite or newer, it is recommended to install Docker for Mac, which runs as a native Mac application. I'm running a relatively newer version of Mac. Here, I just click Getting Started with Docker for Mac. Let's download the stable version. As you see, it is downloaded the installer. I'm fast-forwarding the video until the download is complete. Now the installer is downloaded. Let's click it. Then drag the whale to the Applications folder. Just type your password to proceed. Then open the Applications folder and double-click the whale icon. Click Next. Now installer is asking for privileged access, as it needs to install its network components. Just click OK and type password to proceed. Docker has been installed on my local box. As you see, we have a whale icon on the menu bar on top of our desktop. This initialization phase might take a while to complete. I'm fast-forwarding the video until it's finished. This is what you would see if everything goes well. Now Docker is starting. Finally, we got Docker up running. Let's open a command line terminal. Then type Docker info. Docker info would display the system-wide information about Docker. As you see, Docker is running inside a Linux virtual machine. You can also configure your Docker preference by clicking the whale on the top menu bar, then select Preferences. Now we're under the General tab. Docker for Mac is set to automatically start when you log in. We'll leave this option checked so that we can have Docker automatically start when we log in into our desktop. You can also configure the number of CPU processors. You can increase processing power for the app by setting this to a higher number, or lower it to have Docker for Mac use fewer computing resources. By default, Docker for Mac is set to use 2 GB runtime memory, allocated from the total available memory on your Mac. You can increase the RAM on the app to get faster performance by setting this number higher. That's it for this lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it.